How did William Faulkner revise his novels? And today we are going to hear Faulkner speak at length on his revision process, which is much different than a lot of the other authors we talk about on this channel. And my name is Ian, and here on Right Conscious, we cover everything related to William Faulkner. If you look at the playlist down below, you will find an ever-growing library of videos on Faulkner's books, his life, and his writing philosophy. And what makes hearing from a bountiful pool of authors fun and interesting about their revision practices, how they write novels, and so on and so forth, is that you kind of get to align with what you want to align with. Because I can get on here and be energized and say, this is how Faulkner does it, so you need to do it too. But in 2024, you could take one of many paths, and if you understand how to frame it, then you could be successful. But the problem I see with a lot of writers today is that they are trying to apply the wrong frames and the wrong alignments and pieces of advice to their situation and to their goals. And it's an absolute mess. And that's why so many writers aren't successful, have no one reading their work, and are going to die with broken and forgotten dreams and books. And so I really think that Faulkner's approach, and he always has an odd one, will help kind of give a different side than what I've been personally talking about a lot on this channel lately. And so Faulkner now, quote, "In the heart of putting it down, you might put down some extra words. If you rework it and the words still ring true, leave them in. Probably any story that can't be told in one sentence or at least one paragraph is not worth writing. The revision, the cutting out, in my own case, I'm lazy. I don't like to work, and so I will do as much of it as possible in the mind, in thinking, before I undertake the arduous, hateful job of swatting it out on paper. I think the revision quite often follows because when the job is down on paper at last, it still is not quite what it should be. And so you change, you revise, you edit, you try to bring it closest to the ideal of perfection, which, of course, you're not going to reach either. That is, what I'm trying to say is that the revision is, I think, for the writer more than the editor's revision, which is for the reader." And this is some really interesting stuff because I've been talking about people like Cormac McCarthy, Haruki Murakami, among many other, Don DeLillo, among many other literary fiction authors behind me who we all aspire to write like, who spend at least 4,000 hours revising their novels. And when people hear that, they're like, oh my God, that's insane. And so it is refreshing to hear someone like Faulkner say, I don't really care about revision very much. And revision in actuality is just trying to get the story closer to your own ideal, not the reader's ideal. This is all for you. And this brings back a memory of when I visited the Cormac McCarthy archive in Texas, and McCarthy was having these crazy arguments with his editor over his novel Suttree, which I think is the best Southern book ever written. McCarthy refused to take out these scenes where where the protagonist was engaging in underage sex and living with a prostitute. And to the average reader, the editor was right. It was fluff. When I first read it, I was like, why the hell is this here? But McCarthy had a vision. He worked on that book for 20 years. He did put over 10,000 hours into that book. And he wanted it to be this huge spiritual metaphor for the acolytes who could understand the Hermetic codes. But in actuality, a lot of us aren't trying to do that. That would be cool if you could do that. But a lot of us are just trying to write stories for fun. And did you guys hear the literary renaissance statement that Faulkner made at the start? He said, any story that can't be told in one sentence or at least one paragraph is not worth writing. Because if you can't tell a story fast and show that there is a point, then what's the point of writing it? And so many books, so many stories out there don't have a point. And as I've been talking about, if you aren't going to engage in competing with the literary fiction greats behind me, and you aren't going to write for Book Talk, then the only category left is transformative fiction, transformative poetry, stuff that is a wake-up call for people. And that can be done with little revision. That can be done if you are a beginning writer, if you don't have these perfect language skills, or you're a little slow or something like that. Because Faulkner makes this seem a little bit easy because his works can be literary and transformative because he is just a very talented individual. And I hate to say it like that, but he is the lazy guy who can sit and grind out some writing and make it be beautiful. 99.9% of you aren't that. But 99% of you with much less revision than what I call for if you're trying to write something great and be considered a great writer, can write something transformative. But if you are going to enter that zone, you are going to have to realize that you are working with the reader. This isn't about your vision anymore, because if you want your vision, your crazy idea to come to life, and you want to make people care about it, even if it necessarily doesn't have any impact on them, then you are going to have to revise 4,000 or 5,000 hours. And so a couple other things that Faulkner talks about is it sounds like he's the type of writer who either revises as he works or really doesn't revise at all because he figures it all out in his head. And I was talking to a writer over on my Substack the other day. Right now, we're doing a Blood Meridian for Writers course over on my Substack. We're also reading 20 simultaneous books in the Right Conscious Book Club, among many other things. I post daily podcasts, a bunch of other cool stuff. You can go check that out in the link below. But over there, I was talking to a fellow writer. And he's in the military, and he works these like 16-hour shifts for like 2 months at a time. And he works like 5 days of the week. And then the other days he's busy doing errands and stuff. So he only has this small amount of time to write every day, like 2 hours. And he was like, how do I maximize this time? And my advice to him was throughout the day, even if you're working this crazy job, which it sounds like he is, you are going to have to be mentally cataloging what you're going to say. Your entire day is going to have to be centered around saving energy and preparing yourself, preparing your mind to write what you are going to write. And so then when you get there, you aren't going to make as many mistakes. And if the story is good, or if you have money, if you are working a job like that, then your editor can fix the copywriting. Your editor can figure it out. If you either get published traditionally or hire one, they can figure out all the other stuff. And so in actuality, it's not the worst method in the world if you are really busy to just center your life around thinking and plotting and planning and then do the writing. And if you don't have any time for a revision, if you don't have any time, then you should be making a lot of money, or at least a decent amount of money. And you should be able to pay an editor a couple $1,000s to help you out. And if you're that busy, you have no money and you have no time, then you've just really screwed up in life and need to like check yourself before you wreck yourself. And ask yourself, like, what the hell am I even doing? Because that's something that a lot of people don't realize also, is that Cormac McCarthy's editor was William Faulkner's editor for a lot of his novels, Albert Erskine or whatever his name is. And he is, I think, from what I've seen, maybe the greatest editor of the 20th century. He really put in work. He really helped authors kind of find their vision. He didn't over edit. There's like a lot of editors now in historical retrospect that revised people's novels and made them better or changed things. But Albert would just send countless letters and spend an insane amount of time on these novels to make them really, really good. I've read, drafts of Cormac McCarthy's novels from first draft to the last draft and read the letters that they exchanged with each other and all the revision that happened. And I would say that 30% of McCarthy's success in all of his best novels, Suttree, Blood Meridian, are because of his editor. And so to get an editor like that for your novel, I'm saying you're probably going to have to pay over $10,000 for that. And the amount of time he was putting in is probably closer to $15,000 to $20,000, which sounds like a lot. And I understand, but you could either do that yourself and do the revision. You could think through all this, spend that time, or you could buy that time, either or. And I guess that's an overestimate because works like Faulkner or McCarthy are very complicated. And if you were just writing a transformative novel that isn't the most complicated thing in the world, it would take a lot less time to kind of sift through that and help it become a wake-up mechanism. And another thing to note here is that it may seem like I'm a grouchy Grinch when I talk about, people releasing their works out into the world that they haven't put much time into. And a lot of the time, I think that there's a couple different things going on, because it is very rude to give someone a book or ask someone to read a book that either doesn't compete with these people, entertain them a lot, or transform something within them. But as I just discussed, it isn't very hard for it isn't insane to think that every single one of you guys over the next 3 years could release a transformative novel and we could kick off the literary renaissance, everybody. But the most important aspect of that, because it's most likely going to be self-published, is how you are going to prime your audience, how they are going to receive it. And that's another one of these mentalities that we don't like to discuss, that if you were going to take the lazy path, if you were going to take the path of least revision, then you are going to have to not let the artistic work stand by itself, but rather send people into your work with a certain expectation for transformation. You don't walk into a gym or a personal training class and think that you're not going to get any results. I've helped probably thousands of people start Infinite Jest because I've told them that it's transformative, that if you get through it, if you read it, that it is going to change your life. But that wasn't started with me. Wallace's publishing house did one of the most beautiful marketing campaigns for any book that I've ever seen. Probably the most genius marketing campaign for Infinite Jest. They were sending people letters, they were doing commercials, like it was insane. And so when people opened the book, they knew it was going to be challenging and transformative. But when someone sees your book online or looks at your Instagram page or when you talk about it, do they understand what they're getting themselves into without being over-explained? Like, this is going to happen. This theme is about why the real story of World War II was corrupted, that Winston Churchill was an actual god. Whatever the hell your story's about. Why men that wear dresses actually they don't have mama problems. That's a stereotype. And so that's something to keep in mind when you are applying this method. Like I said, I would love for you to write more novels, to feel more comfortable if you aren't trying to be literary, to write something transformative. But you are most likely, if you're not going to revise, going to need an editor, and you're going to need a very good plan on telling people why they should do this. Because people don't care about books anymore. People have lost their trust, especially with fiction books. And if you tell them this is the result that they're going to get, that they're going to be changed in this way, they are going to be much more likely to read your novel. And it sucks that we are here. It sucks that I'm peddling my book to people like, hey, in this fictional book, you're going to learn about how the West was corrupted or like whatever the fuck. And that's going to help you because you're going to realize the violence within yourself or like something dumb like that. It's weird to say that, but that's where we're at in 2024. And if you refuse to do that, then you will end up in the Kindle graveyard most likely and have no success, no readers, and be complaining that no one cares about your work when actually it was on you to tell them why to care. And so there we have it, everybody. There's William Faulkner's thoughts on revision. I like this. I think it's fun. I think a lot of you guys could take a lot of pressure off yourself if you kind of align with this a little bit more than the 5,000 hours of revision like McCarthy does. And thank you guys for being here. Go get my William Faulkner guide down below. It is a free PDF that details Faulkner's influences, my favorite books by Faulkner, and what books you should read by Faulkner if you are a beginning reader or an advanced reader. Thank you guys, and I will see you in the next video.